Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Channel Crime Story Diaries. Thank you for writing us comments with requests to cover events, and here is one of the stories on your requests. Staten Island, one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, rarely finds itself in the national spotlight. However, on February 10, 2016, this quiet suburb was shaken by the news of a horrific crime. The bloody assault in the quiet hotel, which served as a shelter for homeless families, left the local community stunned and sparked a nationwide conversation about this tragedy. Rebecca Cutler, a 26-year-old New Yorker, was originally from Richmond, Virginia. She was known for her bright, vibrant spirit and deep devotion to her children. Despite the challenges she faced, Rebecca remained resilient and hopeful for a better future ahead. Rebecca grew up in a loving family household and always dreamed of having a big family of her own one day. Her 3 little daughters were the center of her whole world, and she did everything in her power to provide them with a happy and stable life. Friends and relatives remember her as a devoted mother who always put her kids' needs first before anything else. However, Rebecca's life was not without its struggles. She faced significant financial hardships and relationship difficulties, particularly with the father of her children, Michael Sykes. In spite of these tough challenges, Rebecca remained firmly determined to create a positive environment for her daughters to grow up in. Rebecca's days were filled with tending to her children, working hard to make ends meet, and spending precious time with her extended family. She frequently visited her own mother, who was an immense source of love and support. Her mother's home was a sanctuary where Rebecca and her kids always felt safe, secure, and surrounded by love. Michael Sykes was 25 years old at the time of the tragedy. He was born and raised in Brooklyn, attending local schools. From 2013, Sykes worked at a Duane Reade pharmacy chain. His criminal record was clean, with no prior convictions officially. In 2015, Michael began a relationship with Rebecca Cutler, and in September of the same year, their daughter Malia was born. Despite having a child together, Michael and Rebecca's relationship was troubled. He repeatedly displayed aggression and jealousy, suspecting his girlfriend of infidelity and monitoring her communication with other men. Conflicts between them grew increasingly frequent. On February 9, 2016, the day before the tragedy, another argument erupted between Sykes and Cutler. Michael forcibly took Rebecca's cell phone, fearing that she was exchanging messages with someone else. This incident was later investigated by the police. Despite the recent altercation, Michael met up with Rebecca and the children the following morning to have breakfast together. Surveillance cameras captured the family returning to the Ramada Inn together around 8 a.m. Nothing seemed amiss, but within an hour, a bloody drama unfolded. Upon returning from breakfast, Rebecca Cutler and her 3 daughters entered their room on the first floor of the hotel. Michael Sykes did not accompany them inside, instead waiting outside. At approximately 8:50 a.m., he entered the room, keeping a hidden kitchen knife at the ready. The next few minutes became the most terrifying in the lives of the hotel's young occupants. An enraged Sykes lunged at Rebecca with the knife, inflicting over 30 stab wounds. The woman quickly lost consciousness due to the numerous injuries. Michael then turned his attention to the children. 1-year-old Ziana and 4-month-old Malia also suffered multiple stab wounds. Not stopping there, Sykes caught up with the oldest girl, 2-year-old Miracle, who was frantically running around the room in panic. In total, during the attack, Michael Sykes wounded his defenseless victims nearly 70 times. This demonstrated the attacker's extreme brutality and fury. Having carried out this bloody assault, Michael Sykes fled the hotel room at 8:54 a.m., leaving behind a horrific scene. Rebecca, Ziana, and Malia were already dead, exsanguinated from dozens of deep wounds. The injured Miracle was still breathing but losing strength. The hidden black-handled knife, from which the victim's blood dripped, lay on the floor among the blood-stained sheets. The mutilated bodies of the mother and daughters remained in the room for about an hour until a housekeeper, who came to clean, discovered them. Around 10 a.m., the woman opened the door to the room and saw the terrible murder scene. She immediately called 911, and within minutes, dozens of police cars, ambulances, and fire trucks arrived at the hotel. Paramedics rushed to save the wounded children. 1-year-old Ziana and 4-month-old Malia were hospitalized at Staten Island University Hospital, but succumbed to their injuries a few hours later. Rebecca Cutler died on the way to the hospital. Only 2-year-old Miracle, despite severe wounds, survived after emergency surgery and prolonged resuscitation. Amazingly, she managed to recover and was later discharged from the hospital into the care of loving relatives. Meanwhile, Michael Sykes, who had committed the brutal attack on his girlfriend and her children, hastily left the hotel and disappeared in an unknown direction. He took public transportation to the St. George Ferry Terminal and then made his way to Manhattan. Along the way, Sykes managed to call his mother, confessing to the crime and hinting at his intention to take his own life. The New York Police Department immediately launched a large-scale search operation as soon as they learned about the circumstances of the murder and the identity of the suspect. Dozens of officers began combing the hotel's surroundings, neighboring streets and parks, hoping to stumble upon the fugitive's trail. Photos of Sykes were posted on wanted signs throughout the city. Citizens were urged to report any information that could help apprehend the attacker to a hotline. While the search was ongoing, Sykes managed to visit the homes of 2 of his friends in Brooklyn. As it turned out later, he spent most of the day after the murder smoking marijuana and playing video games as if nothing had happened. Only one of the friends suspected something was wrong and notified the police. Late in the evening, Sykes finally left his buddy's apartment and headed to Queens, where he had another acquaintance. Detectives investigating the case carefully studied the surveillance camera footage from the Ramada Inn and surrounding streets to reconstruct the suspect's escape route. They also interviewed all possible witnesses, hotel guests, staff, and passers-by. Particular attention was drawn to a video taken at the grocery store where Sykes had breakfast with the victims shortly before the attack. One of the cameras captured the moment when he was arguing and even appeared to hit Rebecca Cutler in front of other patrons. This scene eloquently testified to the tension and conflict in the couple's relationship. Thanks to the persistent work of investigators and numerous reports from concerned citizens, on February 13th, 3 days after the murder, Michael Sykes was apprehended at his acquaintance's apartment on 31st Avenue in Queens. He did not resist the police and was immediately sent for questioning. At a press briefing, Chief of Detectives Robert Boyce provided details of the arrest and thanked everyone who helped track down the fugitive. During interrogations, Michael Sykes initially denied his involvement in the murder of Rebecca Cutler's children. He claimed that the mother herself had done it in a fit of rage, and he then killed her in self-defense. However, the evidence collected at the crime scene and during the investigation unequivocally pointed to his guilt. Staten Island District Attorney Michael McMahon personally led the team of prosecutors in this case. At a press conference, he stated, "The vile and violent nature of this crime makes it our top priority. The public can be assured that we will make every effort to bring the killer to justice." The prosecutor's office charged Sykes on 14 counts, including 3 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, menacing, and unlawful possession of a weapon. On February 29, 2016, Michael Sykes appeared in court but refused to plead guilty to the charges against him. The judge appointed him defense attorneys and sent him to Rikers Island to await trial. The victim's relatives were present in the courtroom and could not hold back their emotions. "He's a monster, a real monster. How can a person do this to little children?" sobbed the grandmother of the murdered girls. The trial in the Sykes case began in the fall of 2017 at the Staten Island Supreme Court. The prosecution insisted that the sole motive for the brutal crime was the defendant's jealousy and anger over suspicions of Rebecca Cutler's infidelity.
But I will tell you why that man killed Rebecca Cutler. And it got to the boiling point for him when he took that oath. That is why he killed. He said that man sitting right over there, that loving, caring, doting father, is guilty of all the crimes charged in this case.
Prosecutors provided irrefutable evidence of Sykes' guilt. Surveillance camera footage, witness testimony, fingerprints and DNA on the murder weapon, and a history of internet search queries about ways to conceal evidence of a crime. Several of his acquaintances testified in court about Sykes's repeated complaints about his girlfriend's infidelity. Meanwhile, Sykes's lawyers insisted on his innocence in the murder of the children and asked the jury to consider the attack on Cutler as self-defense. They appealed to the absence of eyewitnesses and called the evidence against their client circumstantial and ambiguous. However, the prosecutor's most compelling evidence was the victims' bodies themselves, with dozens of stab wounds that eloquently testified to the attacker's frenzied rage and cruelty. In November 2017, the jury found Michael Sykes guilty of second-degree murder of Rebecca Cutler. However, regarding the murder of her children, they could not reach an agreement. The judge scheduled a retrial of these episodes for the fall of 2018. Sykes was sentenced to 25 years in prison for Cutler's murder and sent to prison to await a new trial. During the second trial in the fall of 2018, the prosecution presented new evidence and testimony that convincingly proved Sykes's guilt in the murder of Ziana and Malia Cutler and the attempted murder of Miracle. Forensic experts confirmed that the defendant's fingerprints and DNA were found not only on Rebecca's body, but also on the girl's bloodied clothing. Moreover, it was revealed that a few days before the tragedy, Sykes had visited a shelter for victims of domestic violence and told employees about his desire to take revenge on his ex-girlfriend for her infidelity. This time, the defense's main argument about Sykes's non-involvement in the attack on the children did not convince the jury. They unanimously found him guilty on all counts: first-degree intentional murder of 1-year-old Ziana and 4-month-old Malia, and attempted first-degree murder of 2-year-old Miracle. District Attorney Michael McMahon hailed this decision as a triumph of justice. Today, we finally put an end to this horrific case.
And since, Mr. Sykes, you couldn't be with her, you wouldn't be with the children. And like so many other spiteful people in this world, you decided that if you couldn't have her, nobody would have her. If you couldn't have the children, nobody would have the children. It was callous, brutal, and inhumane. And even those words can't begin to describe the carnage, death, and destruction you caused.
Michael Sykes will face the punishment he deserves for his inhuman crimes and will never be able to harm another child again, he said after the verdict was announced. On December 14, 2018, the final hearing in the Sykes case took place, at which Judge William Garnett pronounced the sentence. Given the extreme cruelty, audacity, and cynicism of the crimes, the court sentenced him to 2 life terms for the murders of Ziana and Malia, and an additional 25 years for the attempted murder of Miracle. All terms were to be served consecutively. Thus, Sykes was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The victims' relatives greeted the verdict with loud applause. Finally, this monster got what he deserved, but will it bring back my girls? They were so tiny, so defenseless. May he burn in hell forever, exclaimed Rebecca Cutler's mother through tears. The chilling murder of Rebecca Cutler and her young daughters Ziana and Malia, and the brutal attack on 2-year-old Miracle at the hotel shelter on Staten Island in February 2016 became one of the most tragic and high-profile criminal cases in New York history. This horrific event shook the entire country, prompting a discussion about the systemic problems that made such an outburst of violence possible. The tragedy of the Cutler family vividly highlighted the numerous challenges faced by homeless families in America. Living in unsuitable hotel rooms, lacking proper social support and protection, and constantly being under stressful conditions, all of this creates a dangerous breeding ground for conflicts and aggression. Authorities and communities must learn from this case and make every effort to ensure decent and safe conditions for the temporary housing of families in need. The story of Rebecca and Michael is also a cautionary tale about the destructive power of jealousy, anger, and domestic violence. Sykes's pathological obsession with his girlfriend, constant suspicions of infidelity, and monitoring of her every move ultimately erupted in a horrific attack on the entire family. This case should serve as a reminder to all of us about the importance of timely response to alarming signals in relationships, the need for psychological assistance to troubled couples, and the obligation of the state and society to protect victims of domestic terror. the legal aspects of the case cannot be overlooked either. The nearly 2-year trial of Michael Sykes demonstrated how difficult it can be to prove the guilt of a suspect in committing such brutal and unthinkable crimes. Even despite the obviousness of the evidence against the killer, the first jury failed to reach an agreement on his responsibility for the attack on the children. Only thanks to the perseverance and professionalism of the prosecutors in the retrial did Sykes finally receive a life sentence on all counts. This experience testifies to the need to improve the American judicial system so that even the most audacious and cruel criminals cannot escape just punishment. However, the most important lesson of this drama is not related to the actions of the state or the sentence of the criminal. At the heart of this story is the fate of specific people whose lives were ruined or forever changed by horrific violence. A mother with 3 young daughters who were simply trying to survive in difficult circumstances. A young man with a hard childhood and bad inclinations, unable to cope with his demons. Relatives, friends, and the Staten Island community who will bear the burden of loss and suffering because of this tragedy. But amid the pain and grief, there is also a light of hope. Little Miracle, who survived by a miracle and became a symbol of the indomitable human spirit. The Michael Sykes case is not just a criminal story. It is a warning, a challenge, and a call to action for each of us. We must cherish and support one another, especially the most vulnerable. We must be attentive to the pain of others and be able to extend a helping hand in time. We must tirelessly eradicate all manifestations of violence, cruelty, and indifference from our lives and the life of society. Only then will Miracle and thousands of other victims be able to heal from their traumas and find a better life. This is the most important conclusion that we all must draw from this tragic but instructive story. At the site of the tragedy, the Ramada Inn on Staten Island, caring citizens created an improvised memorial. They leave toys, flowers, candles, and children's drawings there, in memory of the victims and in solidarity with all victims of violence. And the portraits of the smiling Rebecca with her daughters have circled the globe and become one of the most famous and poignant images of this terrible cautionary tale. Traditionally, thank you for watching, and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel. It's always interesting and sometimes even creepy.